All right, do we have everyone?
I don't think Deb's here yet.
I'm
Oh,
here.
there she is. Yep.
Yeah, there she is.
Yep.
Hi, Deb.
Okay. With that, Alyssa, do you want to make us live?
Mayor, Council, we are live.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. I call to order the the Victoria City Council workshop meeting for Monday, December 14th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Tonight, we have two items on the agenda. 2.1, the 2019-2020 strategic plan results discussion, and secondly, 2.2, stormwater utility rate study findings and recommendations. And if anybody's wondering, minor technical glitch with getting the 2.2 on the second item, but yet it's there. It's pretty self-explanatory. And yes, we do have two different items for the workshop. So with that, Dana, I'm assuming 2.1 is yours.
It is, Mayor. Thanks. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully this is what we were testing earlier. So hopefully you're all seeing that. Is everybody seeing the blue PowerPoint slide, 2019-2020 strategic plan?
Yep, just about it.
Perfect. And I'm just going to go forward here and backwards. Nope. All right, hold on. I'm having all sorts of technical problems today. So I need to make sure. There we go. Okay. I think I'm ready. So I'm pleased to be here this evening to highlight the many accomplishments, efforts, and initiatives undertaken by our talented city staff that help move the needle forward on your strategic priorities. This evening, I have the honor of sharing with you all a summary of the culmination of your and staff's hard work over the last 2 years. You'll hopefully recall, it seems like forever ago now, in April of 2019, we met council and key staff over a 2-day period to discuss current issues, future trends, goals, priorities, and objectives. And then in June of 2019, you council adopted a 2-year plan that set those goals, priorities, and objectives for the city. The idea was to establish clear consensus-based direction for the next 2 years, and then have us actively pursue implementation of those strategies, which is important given to have those clear goals, to have those strategies, given the many priorities that our city and our community face each year. So from those discussions, you then adopted 4 strategic priorities, and they were expanding and enhancing our local economy, adopting guiding principles, building infrastructure, and diversifying housing. For each of those priorities, we also identified a desired outcome. And then we assigned action items, or what we refer to in this report as strategies. And then we would track and monitor our progress. Anybody in the public can go to our website and from our homepage, click on the strategic plan icon, which is what you see on the left of your screen, to come to our dashboard. So you can get a high level summary of what we're doing if you just have 2 minutes and want to check in and see how we're doing, or you can dive into the details. It's all there at your fingertips. So how did we do? We started this journey with big hopes and dreams. We had a fairly aggressive 2-year plan. We had 47 different strategies or action items that we wanted to accomplish for 2019 and 2020. And despite the pandemic throwing us a curveball this year, we actually completed 34 of those 47 strategies. We started another 10, and we didn't quite get those over the finish line, but we were close. And then we either didn't start or we missed altogether 3. So let's take a closer look, and let's start with expanding and enhancing our local economy. For this priority, we identified 4 outcomes. You can see them on your screen. Develop Downtown West, which is also referred to as our 13.5-acre property. Update our downtown master plan. Increase economic activity, and increase jobs and diversify our tax base. So on this screen, you see a quick snapshot of just how well we did. And we're not able to say, unfortunately, that we achieved everything that we set out to achieve here, but we came pretty close. And now we'll dig in a little bit more. So related to our Downtown West development, Our specific takeaway for this was to enter into a development agreement. And because we didn't do that, we have to chalk this one up as a missed goal. But we were actually pretty excited about the progress that we've made, and specifically these last 2 years. So in 2019, you all adopted a shared vision for how you'd like to see the property develop. Both in 2019 and 2020, we submitted a grant application to the Met Council to help offset those infrastructure costs for developing the site. Unfortunately, we weren't awarded any grant monies from those applications. We conducted an infrastructure and phasing feasibility study for the site. And then we've continued to have conversations with our partners at the table. And while we don't have any development agreement in hand yet, we are continuing to be encouraged by our recent discussions with our current partners. Moving on to updating the downtown master plan in 2019 and 2020, you all know we had quite a bit of turnover in our community development department. So that really slowed our ability to fully engage in updating that downtown master plan formally. That being said, we continue to have this deliverable on our radar. And while we didn't make progress in updating the formal plan, there was still a lot of progress happening in our downtown area. So we added 40 additional spaces in the downtown area for special event parking, trail and park parking, and then to serve as overflow parking for our downtown area. These spaces came online in July this year with the conversion of the old public works site to that public parking site. And then with that project, we installed a new large public parking sign. We also completed the installation of parking signs all around our downtown area, as well as wayfinding signage off of Highway 5. We also kicked off a review just this fall of our shared parking ordinance, and we'll be bringing those recommendations for council to review in the coming weeks. I think it's also worth noting that we did have conversation and engaged all the property owners back in 2019 to understand what their hopes and dreams and visions were for redeveloping their properties in the downtown area. When it came to deliverables for increasing our economic activity, I think this is an area we did really well in. We completed 6 of the 7 action items that were identified for this time period. Again, we installed the public parking signs downtown. We created a calendar of events for city and community-wide events for our website. We looked for creative ways to market and promote the city. Our My Sidewalk tool, which is the tool that we also use to report our progress on our strategic plan, is used as an instrument to help spin up reports on demand for developers and investors. We also worked creatively to draw visitors to Victoria. For example, we partnered with Inky Brewery and Southwest Chamber of Commerce to host our inaugural farmers event. We're partnering again with Inky Brewery to launch the Winter's Farmers Market. We had initially planned to kick that off on Small Business Saturday, November 28th, but COVID had other plans for us. So right now that market is online, but we are still hopeful that as restrictions maybe lift, we'll be able to offer that market later this winter. We are partnering with the Victoria Business Association to breathe new energy and life into a more robust winter lighting celebration. And we had planned again for this to happen this winter, this year, but COVID had a different plan for us. So we refocused this year's event to drive traffic to our downtown area and to our Victoria businesses by promoting our many different restaurants and shops downtown and throughout the city. With the recent retirement of our HR and communications manager, Gwen Campbell, we had an opportunity to restructure that position and hire a new communications and public engagement manager who would assist us with moving that needle forward with promoting the city from that business and economic development as well as visitor perspective. So Kendra Grawl joined our team just a few weeks back in mid-November. We're happy to have her. Marty Dahl, our Community and Economic Development Director, joined our team in January, and he's actually sitting on the county's new tourism board, who's working to create print and electronic marketing materials that would not only promote Victoria, but also the cities in Carver County. And then on your screen, you can see the yellow dot on there, identify marketing strategy and resources is the one item that we didn't really get to, and this was mainly due to a resource squeeze. So our former communications manager wore 3 hats: communications, HR, and IT. So with the restructuring of that position, we now have some capacity to focus on developing that strategic communications plan, which includes a component for marketing and promoting the city. When we look at how well we did with increasing jobs and diversifying our tax base relative to that action plan, we delivered on 3 of the 4 action items. We completed the small area plan study, which set out to refine the vision of how you would all prefer to see the area, our south and west growth area, develop. We explored partnerships in many different ways that came in different forms, from discussion with property owners to completing the orderly annexation agreement amendment with the Laketown Township. We hosted 2 developer roundtables that allowed us to gain insight and feedback on what our strengths and barriers were to development in this area. We've been meeting with developers to review ideas and sketch plats for development. We've also conducted multiple studies that would help provide information to developers when making decisions to invest or purchase property in this area. And as you can see here, we did not complete the utilities to this area. So while we're prepared to move forward with that extension, to minimize the financial risk to the taxpayers, Council, you all decided that it would be best to kind of delay the extension until growth and development was imminent. So you all know you just recently reviewed a sketch plat for a large parcel in this area. So we're hopeful that in 2021, we'll be able to say that we have started that extension of utilities. Moving on to adopting guiding principles, we can see how well we did here. And for this priority, we had 4 outcomes that you wanted us to achieve for 2019 and 2020. As you can see here, we did quite well. We didn't hit the mark 100%, but we can take a closer look. So our first objective was to develop a long-term financial strategy. And first long-term financial plan, and we developed a long-term financial plan by expanding how far out we budget into the future. So behind the scenes, we're now out 15 to 20 years in all of our funds. Staff reviewed and updated our long-term financial plans for the city as part of the 2020 and 2021 budget processes, and of course, we made changes along the way as part of that process. We continued our multi-year budgeting process and enhanced the presentment of our budget book. We now have a more detailed narrative on types and uses of funds that's easier for the residents to follow and understand. The council also was presented and adopted a 5-year CIP for 2020, covering that 5-year period of time. And then on later this evening at our regular meeting, you'll be considering the 2021 5-year CIP. We've conducted a space needs assessment to help us with long-term financial planning for maintenance, so taking care of our existing facilities, but also planning for expansion or new facilities in the future. We conducted a future fire station study. We're in the process of wrapping that up. We also talked about response time discussion for our fire services. You also explored the use of utility franchise fees, and you held an undergrounding policy discussion for using those funds. We conducted both a stormwater rate as well as stormwater rate study, as well as a sewer and water rate studies to help us identify and plan for funding needs in the future. You've combined some capital funds for greater transparency, specifically our trails and parks funds. And then we've delivered a 2020 budget, and we're in the process of presenting a 2021 budget that would meet your desired tax and debt levels. So these efforts in part help the city maintain its AAA bond rating, which places emphasis on having that long-term financial plan, not only in place, but one that's followed as well. As you can see here, establish a business subsidy policy is one that we've started, but didn't quite get across the finish line. We do have a business subsidy policy in place, but it doesn't have a lot of depth to that. So we have this on our radar for early 2021. Before I move on, I just think it's important to just take a moment and commend council for your strong financial policies that really focus on financial resiliency. It's these policies and strong fund balance position that have actually allowed us to weather the pandemic as well as we have, especially with being able to keep a balanced budget, which we're required to do by state law, without having deep cuts to services or cuts to services. We've seen some cities dip into their fund balances and have budgets that didn't allow the city to pivot as swiftly. And so what we're seeing as a result of that is a downgrading or being put on negative watch or negative outlook at the rating agencies. So I just wanted to thank you all for your unwavering support on maintaining your financial policies especially during this uncertainty time, because they're difficult decisions, and we appreciate the difficult decision to make, and that long-term, the ability to use that long-term lens has really made us more resilient and able to maintain our AAA status, which saves our taxpayers money in the long run. So thank you for that. Looking at increasing public engagement, I think this is an area we've done really well. As you can see, we achieved everything we set out to accomplish for this area. This year, we launched our inaugural Citizens Academy with 15 residents participating. Our goal is actually 8, so we'd like to say that this was a resounding success. The pandemic has caused us to pivot slightly for this next period, 2021, as we're planning for that now. So we're trying to figure out how we could effectively and get people excited around a virtual event. We partnered with our downtown businesses to promote Light Up Victoria, which would really encourage visitors and residents to shop locally. We were able to introduce Eat Street 2020 to help our restaurants expand their outdoor dining space during the pandemic and respond to the new and changing restrictions for our bars and restaurants placed on us by the state. Our fire department offered a fire truck parade to help residents celebrate birthdays during the shutdown period. We are super excited to announce that Santa's coming in early this year to Victoria and will be making an appearance on a fire truck on December 19th. In 2019 as well as 2020, we mingled with our neighbors at the National Night Out gatherings, albeit 2020 looked a little bit different this year. We also held our 2nd and 3rd annual Showcase Victoria photo contests. We held lots of public engagement this year. We held surveys, or the last 2 years, neighborhood meetings, open houses. We spun up steering committees and task force to look at things like Wasserman Lake Preserve, road improvement projects, sidewalks and trail connections, improvements to like Highway 5, for example, the County Road 10 and 11 corridors, another example, visioning for that south and west growth area. We even went into a deep dive governance process to consider whether we wanted a local option sales tax as part of a solution for downtown parking. So lots of engagement with our residents and businesses throughout this 2-year period. We even increased our web and social media presence. So during Q3 this year, Q4 numbers aren't in yet, but Q3 of this year, our website was visited 29,000 times. That's just over a 25% increase from the first of the year. With our new communications and public engagement manager on board, Kendra, we expect those numbers to continue to increase as she's more proactively engaged in those engagement pieces. Here's another area, monitoring and evaluating strategic priorities that we've done well. So we have completed all 5 actions that we identified for this objective. We standardized our staff reports. We launched an agenda creation and workflow management tool that allowed us to automate our agenda creation process and easily track how each item that comes before you ties back to your strategic priorities. We also are tying our budget decisions back to those strategic priorities. We created a standardized template for all policies. We added some new policies. We made modifications to existing policies, and all those things reflect best practices. And then we combined them all into one policy manual, which council will now review annually and adopt annually. In 2018, before this plan was adopted, we did not hold any workshops. In 2019, we held 17 workshops. And in 2020, this year, we've held 15 workshops, all of which allowed you to take those deep dives into policies or other topics of interest or emerging issues before you're taking any specific action at council meetings. Sharing our vision for Big Victoria. Now, what we mean by Big Victoria is, what do we look like when we're fully grown? So this was a bit more challenging for us. You can see we're below the target here. And while we made some good progress, we think in that growth and visioning for what we're going to look like in 20 plus years, really it's our turnover in that community development area delayed us and just driving this one over the goal line. Our plan for Big Victoria included completing a small area plan study, which we did. We hosted those developer roundtables. We had conversations with the property owners. We looked at a future fire station study. So we've definitely made progress. We just didn't quite get this one over the finish line. We're continuing with our well siting study. We are wrapping up our Chaska Creek modeling study. We have looked at our utilities and we're prepared to move forward with those as development becomes imminent. GIS is something that we've used to help map our infrastructure, and we've done this and we'll continue to add to that and maintain that GIS data as we grow and add infrastructure. We still need to review and discuss our business subsidy policy. And then those conceptual drawings that translate what our report and our conversations and vision is into something that's more of a, I don't want to call it an artistic vision, but a shared vision for us to help communicate what does that South and Growth area look like to us, is something that we weren't able to do because we just ran out of funds to be able to do that with that small area plan study. And then we also need to determine what reporting mechanism we're going to use to measure that progress. So a little bit more work to do on this area, but again, good progress made. Moving on to building infrastructure, we had 3 specific outcomes we were looking for: creating a partnership with School District 112, which is Eastern Carver County Schools, developing a 5-year park and trail plan, and then city facility planning. So we can take a closer look at that. As you can see here, one of the specific takeaways was to work with District 112 to locate a new school in Victoria. And while we had some good conversations and we're engaged in conversations with the school district actually chose the city of Chaska to locate a new school. A failed referendum, however, in November 19 has put those plans on hold. Additionally, the district has long held land in Victoria off of Highway 5 in Cochia for a future school, but they just recently sold that land to a developer. And we are in contact with that developer. And so we expect a sketch plat in the coming weeks that we'll be getting before council that will focus on a single family development for that property. This just goes to show that sometimes, no matter how hard we try or want to achieve something, sometimes those goals are just out of our reach, out of our control, but we have to chalk this one up as a missed goal. When we look at developing that 5-year park and trail plan, we came really close to hitting that goal. Mother Nature had other plans for us, and we'll cover that in a minute. We were awarded a tree grant from the DNR for emerald ash borer treatment and tree replacement. We also secured a grant to construct Bavaria Trail. We will start that. We anticipate we'll start that in the fall of 2021, and we'll wrap that up in the spring of 2022. Last year, we took that deep dive into our CIP for trails, and we revised our trail cost estimates with a more comprehensive budgeting approach. And what I mean by that is we are now doing those estimates based on estimates for construction, engineering, design, feasibility, easement and right-of-way acquisition costs and inflation. So by taking that change, or by taking that approach and incorporating that into the new CIP, you'll see that in 2021. We also took those trail gap priorities that were recommended by our Park and Recreation Committee, and adopted by council in 2019 and incorporated those into the Trail Gap CIP as well. We began construction on our long-awaited regional amenity, Wasserman Lake Preserve. That was a project in partnership with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. This year we completed the land purchase and we started construction, and this is where Mother Nature had other plans for us. We were scheduled to open in November this year, but if you recall back in late October, early November, we had an early winter weather and events, and that just made construction completion not possible for this year. So we are delayed for completing construction until spring of next year. We are excited to report that we were able to complete one trail connection, Lions Park to County Road 11, and we have plans to complete that connection from the Greencrest, that neighborhood, to the intersection of County Road 11, 18, and 43, and then we'll be starting Bavaria Trail. We did complete the reconstruction of Marsh Lake Road as a city street, and we completed 2 controlled intersection improvements for pedestrian crossings, one at Rolling Acres Road and one at that new controlled intersection at County Road 11, 18, and 43. You also signed a JPA with the county, so we're in the process of evaluating if we're going to be moving forward at 1 or potentially 2 pedestrian controlled crossings along County Road 11 at Deer Run and St. Victoria Church. So more information in the coming weeks and months on those potential projects. This is, again, an area where we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 years. City facility planning was another area of focus. We're pleased to say that we've completed 3 of the 4 action items, and I would say, but for the pandemic, we would also have completed that space needs assessment. We spent time discussing the residential yard waste collection and exploring many different ways that this could be offered as a service with minimal tax levy impact. We were able to utilize our old public works site and offer seasonal yard waste collection events, both in the fall of 2019 as well as the spring and fall of this year. And we were able to do that with minimal impact to the levy by utilizing volunteers. So a big shout out to all of our volunteers for helping us making this event possible for our residents. We wouldn't be able to do it without their assistance. As part of the space needs assessment, we did evaluate our cold storage needs, and you probably recall we started to explore with you all a few options that would address our current and future cold storage needs. We talked about the old public works site. We also talked potentially about the new public works site, as well as the old water tower site off of County Road 11. So more information coming in the coming weeks as we revisit and get re-engaged with that space needs assessment and bringing options and recommendations to council. And then we also developed a long-term staffing plan, which not only helps us for budgeting purposes, but helps us plan for our future facility needs. Finally, let's look at diversifying housing. And we had one objective, which was develop and support life cycle housing. How did we do? We completed all 4 action items that you identify for this objective. In 2019, the CDA updated you all on affordable housing in the county and specifically what the gap was for Victoria. We also contracted with Maxfield Research to conduct a market study to really understand what that need is. We found that we could capture about 120 units nowish with 300 units over the next 6 years. And then recently, just at our last meeting, you directed staff to rename our affordable housing fund, Senior Affordable Housing Fund, with monies in that fund being dedicated towards bringing more affordable housing for seniors to our community. So on your agenda later this evening, when we go into our regular meeting, that will be one of the new policies that will be up for consideration, which will provide guidance and a framework for how those how the monies in that fund would be expended in the future. We did complete one senior housing project. That's the Bethesda Cornerstone Village, which opened in August this year. For anybody who's listening here this evening that does not know what Bethesda Cornerstone Village is, it's an active senior community with detached villa townhomes as well as an apartment building. And what's particularly cool about this project is that Cornerstone Village is a first of its kind housing project where adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities are living side by side with seniors and active seniors in this integrated community setting. It's the first community or model like this in the nation. So we're really excited to be home to that first new model of living. Our Downtown West vision and our partners at the table today would be bringing a mix of housing products to Victoria, from owner occupied to rental, from one level villas to rental senior units and market rate apartments. We also have a sketch plat that you just saw in our South Growth area that would include smaller villa units. So really making progress on that diversification of housing piece. We also continue to identify residential development opportunities in and around Marsh Lake Road with the adoption of our new revised shoreline management ordinance and the completion of those corridor studies for 10 and 11, as well as the completion of that Chaska Creek modeling study, the adoption of the orderly annexation amendment agreement with Laketown Township. All of these things have helped us have more productive conversations with developers and landowners in and around the Marsh Lake Road area. And so let's see, I think that's it here. So with that, we've covered a lot of information. So thanks for letting me kind of breeze through that. It's not easy boiling down all the work that we've done in the last 2 years into one brief overview. We'd really like to showcase even more than we did here this evening. So I think we've made remarkable progress towards achieving your priorities over the past 2 years, especially given the additional resources and financial draw that the pandemic required, not only a council, but staff. So I really am truly proud of the work that our team has done in being able to help move that needle forward on your goals. So I'm really proud of everything that we've been able to achieve for our community. Thank you for your vision and giving us that framework and guidance to do the work that we do for you, for the community. And I just think it's important to thank staff for all the heavy lifting, the innovative ideas, and the efforts that they bring to the table every day. I think we've really laid a nice foundation on with our strategic planning and really to continue forward into 2021 and into the future. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Dana. Very productive 2 years. Council questions or comments? Deb, do you want to go first?
Sure. Incredible momentum, and I'm excited to continue it on into the new year. I think it's important to note here that we don't see any real big change of direction for the city of Victoria. We've got a good foundation in place, like Dana mentioned. We've got some great momentum going forward, and we're going to stay the course and keep making progress.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb. Judy?
I just wanted to commend the staff for all of the work that they've done. So, since I've been on council, I'm coming up on my 2 years with council, and what we've been able to accomplish, I'm still, as I'm looking at everything that you read off to us, I'm kind of going, wow, we did do all that. So I'm excited about the next couple of years, is being able to get this completed, and so everyone can see. And all the groundwork's there. We just need to start seeing the actual progress so that all of our citizens understand everything that's been done. So thank you.
Super. Thank you. Tom?
Very much agreed with all the comments made. Just congratulate staff, Dana and staff, for all the hard work they've done. Just very, very proud of all of the accomplishments that everyone has made over the past couple of years. It has been remarkable. We do have a very good foundation from which to build on, and looking forward to seeing more good things come forward.
Yeah, here. I agree. The lot of progress made in the last 2 years. Far different, Tom, than our first 2 years. So glad to see it. Glad to see Victoria on the right path here. So, Council, any other final comments? If not, we'll move to 2.2. Council?
Good.
Okay. Hearing none. 2.2, Stormwater Utility Rate Study Findings and Recommendations. Dana, is this you or is this Trish?
It's actually Kara.
Like
And
I said, is this
Trish is
Kara?
co-facilitating.
All right, Kara, floor is yours. Take her away.
All righty, I am going to go ahead and share hopefully the right screen. All right, I assume you're seeing my PowerPoint.
I got it.
Perfect. Okay, so Mayor and Council, what we're going to be covering tonight is an update on the stormwater utility rate study that we've been working on for the past few months. A lot of information was included in your packet. Our purpose tonight is to just highlight pieces of that information as well as frame up some questions for the council to consider either tonight or as we move forward. As was the case with the sanitary sewer and water rate study that was completed this year, we aren't recommending implementation for 2021, so we will have 2021 to evaluate how best to move forward. This first slide is just talking about the history of the stormwater utility. The stormwater utility was established back in the early 2000s, and its purpose is to fund operating, maintaining, and improving the city's stormwater system, as well as complying with the city's MS4 permit. As the council is aware, the city is regulated through the Clean Water Act, which is actually administered by the MPCA in the state of Minnesota. The city applies for coverage every 5 years under a general permit, and that permit has a number of requirements that the city is required to, obligations that the city is required to meet annually. The city's stormwater utility is a flat fee. It's charged quarterly to all parcels connected to city sewer, regardless of the parcel size, the land use type, or the expected runoff generated from the site. The 2020 rate was $27 per quarter. The fee schedule for tonight includes a rate increase to $29 per quarter. So to date, since the establishment of the stormwater utility, there's been no changes to the structure type. The rate has increased periodically, but we haven't changed how we structure that from the flat payment. Currently, the city's charging 3,487 parcels within the city. And the graphic here shows the parcels that are currently paying the stormwater utility. So parcels in white and the Big Park District property are not currently paying anything into the city stormwater utility. And when Trish and I look back at what the initial framework of the decision who to charge was, the city made a decision to only charge people who were connected to city sewer. And you know, back in the beginning, I think the charge was maybe $12 or $13 a quarter. And in talking with Trish about it, it would make some sense that you would, you know, not create a bill for somebody for just $12 a quarter. But if you're adding it on to a utility bill that a resident's already paying, that starts to make some sense. The other thing too is that it was very simple to administer. Everybody paid the same. You know, the population of the city at the time was probably not even yet 5,000. So, you know, you had a lot less accounts to deal with and a pretty uniform property. So I think at the time it made sense to approach it that way. What we were tasked with the current study was to take a look at whether or not we should be applying a different rate based on land use type. So, you know, different parcel sizes and different types of property contribute a different amount of stormwater runoff, and that runoff needs to be collected, conveyed, and treated. And that'll vary based on the parcel type and size. So the way to kind of frame that up in your mind is the amount of stormwater that runs off, say, a big Target store, so the Target building and their parking lot, would be very different than what might come off a single family home. that would maybe be different for what would come from a park, and then also for what would stormwater would run off an office building, so a large office complex. In the City of Victoria system, all of those land uses would pay the same. And, you know, historically, like I noted on the last slide, I think that served the city well. But as the city continues to grow, including getting closer to the intersection of 10 and 11, the council may wish to consider changing how those fees are charged and collected based on land use type. So the study lays out a manner in which to do that. Our consultant took a look at all the existing properties, all the existing parcels were digitized, and looked at what the average existing impervious coverage was on each parcel type compared to the maximal allowable impervious coverage type to come up with a framework for charging the fee. So the way this works is that a city would go ahead and establish a residential equivalent unit to then be able to differentiate by land use type. So an REU is the volume of runoff from a standard single family lot during a standard rainfall event. The consultant then takes a look at what that one REU is and makes a determination based on the impervious surface about what should be charged for different types of parcels. So up here on the top, you have these parcel types that you'll notice are likely to have pretty low impervious surface. So farmland, golf course, a rural estate, parks, recreational and preserve, single family home, and then institutional owned open space, you know, generally is going to have a greater amount of impervious surface. So the consultant's proposing that we would charge one REU per parcel. So each parcel of a park would pay, for this analysis, we use the 2021 rate of $29. So each parcel would pay $29 per quarter. I would note that there's two different ways they're viewing it, both as through a per parcel calculation and a per acre calculation. As you start to get into these larger land uses, institutional properties, so that would be like a school site, multifamily, industrial sites, commercial property, that is then proposed to be charged per acre because that, you know, starts to be able to capture if they have higher or lower impervious surface. So changing to this modified approach, still using our base fee of $29 under this scenario would generate about $511,000 worth of revenue. This does include now moving forward charging any unsewered properties as well as city parks. Generally city parks have been charged, but we did go parcel by parcel to make sure they were all included. What we did not include was charging HOA-owned open space and city-owned outlots. Those common areas are often used for stormwater treatment facilities. And in the example of an HOA, so take a neighborhood that has, trying to think of a good example, the Reserve on the Park neighborhood that's just off of Park Drive. It's those twin home units. Each of those units would be paying a stormwater utility, so we didn't think it made sense to also charge the HOA for the open space adjacent to their houses. Under this scenario, as it sits today, there's about 4,058 parcels that would be charged the fee. And just for frame of reference of what we're talking about here, if you wanted to collect the same amount of revenue using today's existing model where you only build the sewered people and didn't have a variation by land use type, the rates would need to be increased to about $36 a quarter compared to the $29 a quarter in order to generate the same amount of revenue.
Kara?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Can you go back to that slide? Okay, so for instance, the golf course is paying $116 annually now. Under this new model, we are proposing that they pay $1,160.
Correct.
So a a tenfold increase.
Correct. And, you know, the golf course definitely struck me as we look at next steps as one we really should take a look at to see if that really makes sense. This is a common way that golf courses are charged in the city, but, you know, we have one golf course. And I think what's unique about our golf course is that we have a lot of stormwater ponds that treat city streets located within their land. So this might be a particular example where you would say, no, that doesn't make sense for the golf course. We should take a look at it a little bit differently. One of the things we identified as a next step is we think it would be helpful for the council to get to see some specific example properties and what this would mean to them, you know, so you can frame up in your mind, well, that really just doesn't make sense for us. But our consultant did need to start with a framework, but the golf course was one that struck me as well. That might be something you'd want to look at, either exempting that all of their land that has ponds on it and only charging them for the one parcel that has, you know, the parking lot and the building and such on it.
Okay. And the rest of this chart is saying, like, for instance, under the single family, we have this 3,363 parcels, and that would generate a total of 390,000, but it doesn't say what we propose per, is it different per single family home?
Every single family house would pay the $29 per quarter or $116 annually. So the same as what is in your current structure.
Okay, so the revenue increase really comes from these other types of properties.
Correct. It comes from charging the unsewered properties. We have I think this next graphic starts to highlight that. So the graphic on the left is just capturing what the proposed fees are by different classifications. So you can see, you know, we don't have a lot of properties that are up at that higher calculation per acre. But this graphic on the right is showing all the properties that under this revised scenario would be paying, where today they don't pay. There's some anomalies up here, like this is the Hawks Point neighborhood. So depending on when we did the capture of from GIS of who was connected versus who wasn't, that's just out of date information. But there's a lot of people up in this area who are on septic systems. This is the Charleston Meadows property. The people down on Marsh Lake Road on the north side that are on septic properties. So it's a combination of picking up, collecting the fee from people who aren't currently getting a utility bill from the city, as well as changing the classification. So, you know, if the council's interested in understanding kind of the dynamic of how much revenue is coming from collecting a fee from people who haven't already collected compared to the change in classification, we can parse that information out for you as well if you want to understand that.
This is Judy. I'd like a little more clarification, because why are we, if they're unsewered, why are we charging them a fee?
So what I mean by unsewered is it means they don't have sanitary sewer to their home, but it still rains on their property. So the philosophy of charging all of the parcels within the city limits stems back to the fact that, you know, it rains everywhere. Rain doesn't discriminate over what the land use type is in terms of where it falls. Runoff occurs off of every parcel off the land that the city is responsible for conveying, treating, and collecting. But additionally, the regulations that are applied to the city are all property owners share in those regulations, I guess would be the logic behind taking that approach.
Okay, and then where do all of our roads play in on this?
So we aren't proposing that the city would pay, you know, some sort of fee on city-owned right-of-way. The parcels that the city would pay under this model would be, city-owned buildings, parks, essentially, the rec center that already pays a fee, but would continue to pay a fee, those types of properties.
Well, I'm thinking about all of our roads that we've paved. That's considered impervious, right?
Yes.
So we're contributing to the need, right?
Yeah, I just don't know that you would charge yourself a stormwater utility fee of that magnitude for all your road right away. That's not something that's not an approach I've seen other cities take. Often the road system and the stormwater within it are part of the conveyance system to get the water away from people's houses to wherever, whether it's a stormwater pond or wetland or lake.
So are we like the properties on Marsh Lake Road that they're unsewered, they have septic? Do they have stormwater ponds there that we control?
Not on their land, no.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to need more detail on this kind of thing, because it doesn't, if their runoff isn't going into a stormwater pond that we are controlling, why would we charge them?
Yeah, and those are decisions for the council to make. The council certainly could stick with the current approach where we don't charge unsewered property. That's for all you have the pleasure of making that distinction. It isn't uncommon for residents to say, I don't have a stormwater pipe in front of my road, so I shouldn't have to pay a stormwater utility. But I think, at the end of the day, the city as a whole is collectively responsible for all of those obligations. And so the question is should all property owners be contributing to paying for that through the stormwater utility? Some cities don't have a stormwater utility and they fund this sort of thing 100% using general tax dollars too.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like different scenarios.
So as I noted, this slide is just highlighting, and you have these figures within your council packet if you want to take a look at them more closely. I've spent an obscene amount of time with them trying to make sure the data was fairly well cleaned up in terms of what properties should be included versus what shouldn't. So properties that are, not highlighted, like in this area, you see a lot of property that's not highlighted. If you were to look at an aerial, that's all wetlands. So this is all city-owned property that is pretty much just a big wetland. So those parcels aren't included.
Okay.
So on what the purpose of the stormwater utility side is, on the left is a list of the various different types of activities that the city might undertake that would be considered expenses that could be paid using stormwater utility funds. The table on the right is an annual projection of how our consultant assembled for how they would anticipate us, what sort of expenses we'd be looking at for the next 5 years. These are annual costs. And took a look at our existing budget for 2021 in order to start to set the framework for that. The biggest thing that you'll see that's different is this pond and BMP maintenance amount is significantly increased. So we've talked about the fact that we really do need to start developing a plan for pond dredging and starting to complete that pond dredging. So we anticipate needing to do some additional studies and analysis to determine which ponds to do in what order. But our consultant's recommendation is that if you can assign $175,000 a year and look at not necessarily doing a project every year, but rather doing a project every other year so that you have a little bit more money to work with to determine then how best to use that money on an every other year basis. So that is built into this. In talking with Public Works, you'll notice that capital outlay is 0, which is what is in the current budget for 2021. At this point in time, they weren't anticipating any big equipment purchases needing to occur in the coming 5 years. That of course can change, but with this 402,000 compared to a revenue of 511,000, that would allow the city to create a little bit more fund balance and then look for additional opportunities for pond dredging as we start to understand what those costs are going to be a little bit more moving forward. We did do some initial comparison to how these fees compare to what some of our neighboring communities are charging. So the table on the left is showing the city's fee compared to these other communities' fees, specifically for single family and agricultural property. So ours would be $29. You can see Chanhassen all the way through to Minnetrista, kind of where we're sitting relative to those. Our consultant also gave us a table for parks to see what our parks would pay compared to what some of our neighboring communities are charging for parks. And then, probably the more interesting comparison, because it's such a change for us, is so this is what our rates work out to for institutional property versus industrial property versus commercial property. And they grabbed the same categories from Chanhassen and these other communities as a comparison. So you can see in Excelsior, for example, their stormwater fee is $30 for a unit per person. But then when they get up to institutional properties, they're charging $180 an acre compared to ours at $29 an acre. Industrial, we have at $58 an acre. Excelsior is at $288 an acre. And then for commercial, they're at $276 an acre compared to $72.50 an acre. Doing these comparisons is a little bit tricky because everybody tends to run the calculations a little bit different, but I do think this gives you a general idea that, some of these other communities are looking at higher numbers. Before we would move forward with any implementation, one of our next steps would be to update this information really to include all the cities in our market comparison group so that we can see how we compare to other growing cities that are, a little bit more similar in nature to what we are. That, these are geographically close, but we use those market cities to represent more of what the city of Victoria is experiencing.
Kara, is that chart under the current model or under the proposed model?
That's under the proposed model. Under our current model, everybody pays the same. Everybody pays, well, this year, 27 per parcel, which, it doesn't vary by acre. Everybody just pays the same.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So what we think would be useful for the council as you give some thought to how best to move forward is taking a look at some additional comparison cities and really pulling out that fee impact on sample properties throughout the city so you can really understand what the impact is on different property types. So talking, to Judy's question about, some example of unsewered properties, what they look like, how that looks, as well as impacts on businesses within downtown, impacts on the golf course. Another big one, just hopping back to this map, right now the Arboretum doesn't pay anything. So we're proposing, the way this is drafted is one REU per parcel, and all of these individual blocks here are parcels. So they would go from paying 0 to paying, quite a bit more if I did the math and multiplied that all by all the parcels. We did check, and they are paying in Chanhassen for the property that's within the city limits of Chanhassen. I, off the top of my head, don't remember how much they're paying, but I have that information. So really, taking a look at some of these properties to understand what the impacts are, I think would be useful for both staff and for the city council before making any final decisions. Making this change to charge this differently by land use type would require ordinance revisions. So our consultant is tasked with going through our ordinance and identifying any revisions that would be needed to implement the new fee. We have a draft report that needs to be finalized. We think there's a need for public engagement. What Dana and I have talked about, that it might be useful to have that public engagement occur concurrently with the public engagement we're proposing to do for the water rates and the sewer rates, so that, particularly when we were talking about business impacts, we're not tackling each one in a vacuum. We're really looking at them collectively together to understand what that implication is for those property owners. And then, as noted, we wouldn't be recommending that the council consider implementation for 2021, but rather 2022 at the soonest. The other thing we've talked about as a staff is the city could think about transitioning to this over time. Might be something that the council might be interested in. I mean, you look at how much additional revenue it is. Those are just things for the council to contemplate. So that just brings our next slide, which is what different topics we wanted to get some input from the council. Whether you agree to these things or whether you need additional information beyond what we've already identified as next steps, or if there's any other questions you have for me. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Yep, thanks, Kara. Council, questions, comments? Anybody want to go first?
I'll start. I would side with Councilmember Black on this. I think I'm going to need more information in order to make a really good a really good judgment on whether this is a good idea or not. I think as we start looking down the road and knowing that we really want to attract and try and recruit some businesses here, I favor us having some kind of a competitive edge in doing that over some neighboring communities. So I think that that's an important consideration. Folks that aren't paying now, if we should determine whether they should be paying. And I think there's a couple different scenarios that we can run before we kind of agree to this fee to change the structure based on the land use type. This is something I favor some more information on.
Thanks, Deb. Judy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good first step. I wouldn't say that this is a final decision. It's something to look at. I know we have to figure out a way to fund the cleanup of these stormwaters as they come available, because that was one of the things that when I first came on board, I found out there was nothing there for that. So I do need, we need to spend a lot more time on this and to come up with different scenarios and to really look at this closely before we just, come up with a blanket type thing. But it's a good first step.
Tom?
Agreed. We're going to get more information on this, but cleaning up these ponds is going to be a huge financial burden on the city. And spreading out that cost to as many people as possible seems to make sense. Whether we like it or not, whether we think we benefit or not, I think everybody does benefit. Just like driving on roads, we use them. Even though the storm ponds, we're not directly, benefiting from a storm sewer pond. It might not be right outside our home, but indirectly, we're all benefiting from it. And I think we need to spread those costs out as much as possible. And certainly, we're going to need more information. But in comparisons with, I'm looking at people like the Mead property. They've got several acres there, and they're not paying now, and under this scenario they will. And looking to get some more information and numbers on those seems to make sense. But it's going to be a huge expense, and I think spreading it out to as many parcels as possible makes sense.
Thanks, Tom. I've said this before when this topic came up with these ponds. I wouldn't favor, the next council will decide, but I wouldn't favor sending a lot of money aside. I wouldn't be opposed to sending a minimal amount of money aside. But quite frankly, we've got 85, give or take, stormwater ponds. We know the state was supposedly looking at this to try to find ways to dredge these for far less money. My concern is not that we shouldn't do it. I would only want to take action or spend money on ponds that are significantly stressed or completely non-functioning, only until such time as we can find out whether or not the state is actually going to do something, right? Because I'd hate to see the Victoria taxpayers take the full burden for this, only to find out the state finally comes up with a solution that is far less expensive. And in the meantime, the residents of Victoria may have put out what literally could be at $200,000, $250,000 per pond, could put out, depending on how many we do, literally millions of dollars. Now, I don't think we do that, but the point being, I'd like to see a permanent solution and not having the Victoria taxpayers trying to take this burden on simply by ourselves. To that point, Kara or Dana, have we heard anything more on this with the state trying to come up or find a way for cities like us to cost effectively clean up and make these ponds function? We all want the clean water, but they put such onerous restrictions on us that it becomes very expensive to take dirt out of the bottom of the pond and literally pile it right next to the pond or move it 50 yards, right? They want all sorts of things done with it. So do we have any update on that? Is there any news?
Sure. So Mayor, just to clarify for the members of the public, what the mayor is referring to is depending on what is in the material that's dredged out of the pond, the disposal. So how you dispose of those dredged materials can be extremely expensive. So depending what's in the material, right now, you would have to haul it to a landfill and pay the costs associated with hauling it to a landfill. Now, we've had the opportunity to do some testing on ponds throughout the city, and we're finding that some ponds don't have that level 3 contaminant in it. So that cost of disposal for those ponds isn't astronomical. So the mayor's correct that as we look forward in terms of how we would build a program for what gets removed, we want to be really smart about what we prioritize. And going back to something Councilmember Gregory touched on, while you might not have a stormwater pond next to your house, at the end of the day, we're trying to protect the lakes and the wetlands that are throughout the city of lakes and parks and trail gaps. So, you know, at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that the water quality is protected in our lakes that have good water quality or improved in our lakes that have degrading water quality. So the other element we've talked about in terms of prioritization that the mayor touched on is, you know, ponds that are either in really bad shape, but also ponds that doing something with them is a benefit. So we did the Swiss Mountain pond a couple of years, and that pond, you know, drains right to a lake. So, you know, trying to come up with that right set of priorities to use this money wisely while the state still tries to figure out alternatives for the land, the type-free contaminants. We haven't the state hasn't come up with a great answer for that. They basically just kind of dialed back how quickly we had to clean them in order to give everybody more time to try to work through that. So I do think, though, it makes sense to try to focus on the ones that don't have that contaminant. And we'll be touching on that with the Church Lake pond agenda item later tonight.
All right, so one final point. I do believe that we need to do the maintenance on these and clean them up so they function as designed. I remember from previous discussions, the new design actually works far better than the old ones, the ones that were built, I think, even in the early 2000s. And I can't remember the specifics of that discussion. The council talked about that before. And I agree with Deb and Judy and Tom that we need to look at other options. And so I don't know if it's viable or we can even do it, but like ponds that don't have level 3 contaminants, we've got 10 acres over at the Public Works. I don't know if we can use that as temporary storage or use that and then have filled dirt, right, once it dries out that others can use. But again, I'm just throwing ideas out there, which gets back to the point that I think this needs to be explored further and look for options that are cost effective. Because if all we have to do is haul it to our own Public Works site and it's not spreading contaminants, then all of a sudden we may end up with dirt that we could even sell to defray the cost of moving it. With the one caveat that if this actually has level 3 contaminants or contaminants that need to be disposed of in some other manner, we obviously wouldn't do that. But anyways, just food for thought. The council, any other further questions or comments?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay, Kara, you don't need anything from us tonight. This is just a briefing, correct?
That's correct. And this was helpful for us to get some thoughts about what direction the council has questions in, so we can go back and do some more work. And I'll work with Dana on what the timeline is for getting information back to you on this.
All right, super. Dana, is there anything else? If not, Dana?
Nope, nothing else, Mayor.
All right, thank you. The council, can I get a motion to adjourn? We'll adjourn for the public's knowledge, we're going to adjourn the workshop, and then we'll reconvene the council meeting at its regular time of 6:30. With that, council, can I get a motion to adjourn the workshop, please?
Make a motion to adjourn the workshop.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Judy. Roll call vote. Deb?
Aye.
Thank you, Judy.
Aye.
Thank you, Tom.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye, so unanimous. We are adjourned. We'll see everybody at the council meeting in roughly 18 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.